I do wish.
Thursday, January 28th at 6:30.
Oh. Dear. I call to order the January 13th, 2014 regular meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request that everyone in the audience please silence their cell phones, including members of the board and administration and other visitors. Would you please stand? Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mrs. Bates will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. Mrs. Witt, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bates.
Present.
Mrs. Copeland-Dansby.
Present.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Coons.
Present.
Mr. Manera.
Present.
Mr. Nelms.
Here.
President Bolton.
Present. If there is no objection, we will change the agenda and postpone the Hayes-Porter presentation for 2 weeks in order that we may add an ongoing attendance audit report from our superintendent. So board members, if you would please hold on to your Hayes-Porter information until the January 27th meeting. And I'd also personally like to thank the Hayes-Porter family and particularly Principal McLean for being so flexible in being able to make that adjustment for us. At this time, we will begin with old business, and I need a motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting of December 9th, 2013, regular meeting, December 9th, 2013, special public meeting, December 16th, 2013, and the special public meeting of December 27th, 2013.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved as presented. Mrs. Bates, as a previous and current chair of the Finance Committee, do you have any particular report regarding the Audit Committee meeting that has been held?
I present the minutes as written for acceptance.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Bates, as chair of Finance, would you present that report?
I present the Finance Committee report as printed for acceptance.
Thank you. Mr. Coons, as chair of the Partnership Public Engagement Committee, would you please present the January 6th committee meeting report?
I present the minutes as written.
Thank you. And then Mr. Nelms, as chair of the Policy Committee, would you please present January 6th, 2014 committee meeting report?
I do present the Policy Committee report as written.
Thank you. Mr. Coons, as chair of the Student Achievement Committee, would you please present the January 6th committee meeting report?
I present the minutes as written.
Thank you all. Any board members have any questions about the January 8th Committee of the Whole report, which was about the orientation of our new members, but I know all members benefited greatly from that presentation, and we thank the administration for its comprehensiveness. Any questions? We need a voice vote to accept the committee reports as written. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much. New business for this evening will begin with the presentations, and the presentation in part that we want to make sure we start with is one to have our superintendent present an update on the ongoing attendance audit from ODE by, well, superintendent will present and we can ask the questions that we need to.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Cincinnati Public Schools today was informed by the Ohio Department of Education that it's taking 2 additional steps in its ongoing review of attendance reporting for the 2010-2011 school year at our high mobility schools. ODE announced that it will rerun our Ohio report card information for Cincinnati Public Schools and 6 other districts, and that it's referring the matter to the Office of Professional Conduct for further review. CPS welcomes this rerun or recalculation of our report card data because our own investigation indicates that the disputed area involving enrollment history of our district's 33,000 students because it's only 130 records, or less than 1% of our district's 33,000 students that are in dispute, would have made no difference in the district's overall rating. Our internal investigation also found no evidence or deliberate manipulation of data by any CPS employee. The ODE review stems from a series of reports by the Ohio Auditor's Office centering on attendance reporting from 2010-11 school year, and it's a continuation of the investigation by ODE beginning last summer. CPS has cooperated fully with both the Auditor's Office and ODE in these reviews. CPS has been fully transparent and open about attendance reporting practices. In fact, they're published on our website. Much of the focus of the state's criticism centered on reporting practices for intra-district breaks in enrollment, during which a student enrolled in one district school subsequently enrolled in another district school, sometimes several weeks or a month or 2 after withdrawing from the original school. Following the auditor's report, CPS changed the intra-district enrollment reporting practices to be consistent with the auditor's finding. We now report students being continuously enrolled even when they are not in attendance at any district school for weeks or months once they re-enroll at another CPS school. We continue to believe that the larger issue highlighted by these reviews is that of excessive mobility, which is the highest in some of our neighborhood high poverty schools, and that this truly does have a negative impact on academic achievement in these schools. So Cincinnati Public Schools will continue to work with our partners to stabilize families, which we believe really merits a state focus and an at-large community focus as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions from the board members? Thank you very much, and I know the board appreciates the ongoing efforts to keep the board and the community informed and to do the other things that need doing in order to best serve our students and their families. We also have, as a request from some board members, not necessarily a presentation, but I would call it a homework assignment. And part of that is the document that you have before you, which is Cincinnati Accountability and Report Card. And it was asked as a follow-up regarding the Committee of the Whole that we might be able to look more closely at all of the items and indicators or what have you in the new report card so that this can help inform the board's efforts to not only build a budget but also hold the superintendent and the treasurer accountable and also find ways to continue to have quality instruction. So I'm going to make sure every board member has this. Assistant Superintendent Mr. Miles put this together for our homework, and at a later date very soon we'll be having questions and answers and go deeper into this. Mr. Coons?
I respectfully submit, in the words of Melanie Bates, why are we still getting 30-page documents? I mean, this is full color, glossy. I don't need this personally. I know last time we said we'd have it separated by a board member, and Mr. Nelms expressed that his learning style was very much paper and pen. I would much prefer personally to get this electronically and not have to.
And I would also say that staff discussed this with me, and what we figured was to have the first at least 30 days of our new board members to start to figure out what is best for them or each member, as well as begin to figure out, too, how we might best equip these tables and ourselves to go electronically. And indeed, tonight we announced that I think this is correct, we're trying to stream our meeting.
We are testing a live stream of this meeting. So far, it seems to be working.
And also that would mean that, as you say, these documents that we have presented, be they for individual and hard copy or electronically, what we want to ultimately be able to do is, as we look at a document in front of us electronically, it can show up there on that screen, so that indeed the public might also be able to kind of go with us and watch. So point taken, and as we will at least go through these first 30 days of the new board to figure out what's best for each individual.
And on that note, Mr. Coons, since I didn't get a copy of the accountability report, I'll take yours since you don't want to
There's yours. I stole yours, Mr. Nelms.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everything happens for a reason.
I love it. So those are tonight our two presentations as such, and now we'll go to the announcements section of the meeting, and that we start with Mr. Nelms for kudos, and then we'll go over to Mrs. Bates for the retirements. But Mr. Nelms?
I have 4 kudos, and if I might ask for my fellow board members to assist me with the reading of these kudos, and you can distribute those, and you don't have to be a CPS grad to read the kudos. But before I start out, my disclaimer will be, as a board, may we make every decision to serve, that we make decisions that will benefit the students, the parents, and the communities that we represent. My first kudos would be to grandparent leader Brenda Gray Hudson for her vision in creating the Barn Hill Academy Champions Against Bullying program. Due to her granddaughters being bullied, the program focuses on language arts and anti-bullying. The program also teaches good manners and self-esteem building, along with providing outreach initiatives for the community. Thank you, Ms. Gray Hudson and the Barn Hill Academy Champions, for making a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Nelms.
We also want to extend our kudos to Ron Baumer, a 1979 graduate from the School for the Creative and Performing Arts, who now goes by the name of Ron Baumer. Mr. Baumer changed his name to avoid critics' clever play on words of his former last name sounding like Bomber. Mr. Baumer is now in town performing in the Broadway musical The Book of Mormon, one of his many Broadway productions. Ron grew up on the west side of town and attended Cheviot School in grade K to 6. Ron quotes, "SCPA saved my life." So kudos.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, we have kudos to Jason Stuckey, a 2006 graduate of Walnut Hills High School. Mr. Stuckey was sworn in as an Ohio Assistant Attorney General on November 13th, 2013, and appointed to the Civil Rights Section in Columbus, Ohio. Congratulations, Jason Stuckey.
And I must add, he was one of my soccer players.
All right.
He also went to
Mrs.
North
Bates.
Avondale.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's good. Excellent. I was going to pass this kudos on to Ms. Copeland Dansby so that you could have a crack at it, but then I saw who it was, and my sister had this teacher, so I wanted to be able to share kudos to Althea Thompson, visual arts teacher at the School for Creative and Performing Arts, who was named one of the 20 National Artist Teacher Fellows. Congratulations, Ms. Thompson.
Wonderful.
Next time.
All right.
Always a lot to celebrate here. Appreciate that. And now we'll move on to the retirements.
Yes, and I have the honor of acknowledging our retirees who spent many years serving our children. Certificated personnel member who is retiring, Paula Hameen. Civil service personnel who are retiring, Judith Amlong, Marguerite R. Hoppert, Anita Riley, Jean Robbins, and Tina West. We wish you well and thank you for your many years of service to our children.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. We are now at the item of our agenda for hearing the public. We have 3 folks that would like to speak. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and our timekeeper is our treasurer, Mrs. Witt. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. please refrain from discussing any personnel items. When your name is called, and I'll do all three in the order that we'd like you to speak if possible, please come on down. And that is Diane Williams, who's going to be talking in terms of Gamble Montessori. Jim Berry, some people call the 8th member of the school board. Mr. Berry is going to be talking about CPS and City Council cooperation. And then we have Tim Fuckman from College Hill Fundamental Academy, center of the universe, College Hill. There you go, my neighborhood, what can I say? And actually, come on down to this one so we get you on camera better and well lit.
Who's up first? Miss
Diane Gamble is. Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Not very well.
We positioned the mic right in front of you.
Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Good evening. Happy New Year to each of you, and congratulations to all of the new CPS board members. My name is Diane Williams, and I am a parent of Gamble Montessori. We're grateful again to have the opportunity, the privilege even, to speak with you this evening.
Can you speak up a little bit? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would like to personally thank you for closing the schools last week during the sub-zero temperatures. Thank you so much for that. I'm hopeful that you are in receipt by now of our January letter to the board, and we have returned again with other Gamble Montessori parents and students tonight. If they would stand, they are standing, wonderful. And we respectfully make another appeal to you regarding our disappointment with the Gamble Montessori renovation. We are respectfully still asking for the process for possibly requesting use of your maintenance monies to aid us in some of the preliminary things listed in our November letter to you. And while there were a laundry list of things, we would be so grateful for your consideration of some of the preliminary things, those being the building heating. The students complain daily of being cold, and yet we've been told that the classrooms have individualized heating. Carpeting, please. At least in the middle school classrooms to begin with, we would be so grateful for that. Painting of the school lockers and benches in the school colors. Our front entrance traffic flow, we would love that addressed. The gymnasium floor, painting the basketball mounts and bleacher seating, concrete and blacktop asphalt repairs. There are missing ceiling and floor tiles, cabinet installation repairs needed, and we would love landscaping. And if you would indulge us a moment, we'd like to read you some excerpts from some letters from some of the students at Gamble Montessori. Anna Dwyer, a 10th grader, says she'd like to thank the faculty and devoted parents who work so hard for the students at Gamble Montessori. She knows that the past few years have been difficult for fixing up the old school building. She's speaking on behalf of fellow classmates. I feel that our new building could be so much better than it is. When I visit other schools, such as the School of Creative and Performing Arts, Walnut, or Clark, they look professional, clean, and the buildings beam with pride for their school. Does that mean my time is up? Lastly, we're still requesting the board's consideration to come and tour our school and the campus and advise us the best way to arrange that tour for you. And we and others, I and others, will be willing to adjust our schedules to best meet your times in order to tour the building with you. Thank you for your consideration and for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your information and persistence, too. We welcome you back to share your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Let's get through all of them and then we'll do the administration, please.
Well, it's a new year, and I didn't want you to forget my face. I'm Jim Berry, and I'd like to say hello to our president again, Eve Bolton, and to the other members and some of the new members, and our treasurer and our very good superintendent. Talk about the high sea collaboration between the Cincinnati Board of Education, hopefully tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and the Cincinnati City Council.
Hold on, Mr. Berry. I think we have a volume issue. Maybe raise the mic closer to you.
I'll put it right there.
That's
Is
not
it still
doing a
not
thing.
doing it? Well, I'll try to talk louder then. I won't say many years ago, but years ago when David Crowley was on City Council, there was a good relationship between the Board of Education and the City Council. There was talk, and I hope it isn't going to come up again at that time, about the $5 million that was supposed to come from the stadium funds. I hope that's put to bed and we're never going to have an issue about that again. I assume the casino is going to be the next item. But what I'm mainly interested in, I hope that is covered, is if you remember the school crossing guards, now all of a sudden that becomes a CPS problem. Now to me, that's a quality of life issue. That's a safety issue. You know, that's for our children. Nurses, you know, what the hell happened here? Used to have nurses, now all of a sudden that's a CPS problem. Well, that's a health department. Health department gets their funds from the city. I don't have to tell you that. And then the school resource officers. I mean, it just keeps up on and on and on. And I think City Council is trying to balance their budget on the backs of CPS. So I hope with PG Sittenfeld, who's my next across the hall neighbor, will work with you all, especially with Eve, and hopefully resolve some of these things to our benefit. That's it, and you'll be seeing more of me, I'm sure. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. College Hill Fundamental. Come on up, Mr. Footman. I think you have an invitation or something for us, don't you?
I do. I've placed a letter from us on your table, and I just wanted to invite you all personally, not that I would expect that you maybe would have time to come, but I, in part, wanted to let you know that we really appreciate your support. I can also speak for all the elementary music teachers that I talk with, that we feel the support of the board and we appreciate it. Obviously, we feel music is super important in the development of a child, not just music. But anyway, at College Hill, we're very excited to have gotten this invitation to perform at the State Music Convention. Of all the thousands and thousands of schools, we're one of them. And I wanted to share the good news with all you in person. Of course, we play on Thursday, February the 6th in Columbus, and since most of our friends can't get up there that time, we're having a send-off concert on Tuesday the 28th. Love to see you over there. My little stick band, I know that you've got lots of things. I'm glad I actually was here after I watched your binders and all of the, you were talking about electronic information, and there's so many things that go by your mind. I'm glad that I could just for a few minutes let you know on a small scale what's going on in the schools that you're working for. So thanks a lot. Hope to see you there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The first one, I do have a personal question for you. I have a sixth grade granddaughter that attends.
Yes, you do. London.
London. Is she a part of this?
She is not.
No, she's not.
She was invited, but she didn't join our band.
Okay. Thank you. I'll speak to London about that. Thank you, Mr. Fussman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all. And I think Mr. Coons, at the end of the Gamble concerns, did you want to suggest some sort of update or something from the administration?
Yeah, I was curious if the parents and folks at Gamble have been addressed by the administration for some of the needs that they're asking for, the carpet and such. I know we've heard about it a few times, and I'd be more than happy to visit Gamble, so I'll schedule that on my own. But I did want to know what if anything the administration could tell us.
I do know that Mr. Mooring and Robin Brandon, our architect, have gone out. I think there's a disconnect here because Gamble wasn't part of the facilities master plan. The community asked us 10 years ago, asked the board if they would give them a building in order to create a second Montessori high school. So the state did not the state said we did not need extra seats or an extra high school. So what's happened after the letter came, I did talk to the treasurer, and we're not allowed to use the maintenance budget that we have to set aside for the buildings in the facilities master plan. So those 50 buildings are covered. But Gamble, Hyde Park, and Taft, when the communities asked that we open or add them back, they weren't part of the FMP. They were done with COPS bonds, which was for energy saving. So that allowed us to do heating and air conditioning. So we certainly can follow up with heating and air conditioning. We could do, I think, new windows because that's energy savings, new lighting in the building because that counts as energy savings. Then our facilities department tried to do some additional painting and such in those buildings, but there is no way that those 3 buildings are going to look like the brand new schools that cost $14 million. They were added on later, not part of the FMP. We're not allowed to use those dollars, I've been told, to maintain them. So we have to use general fund dollars that we use to buy books, pay teacher salaries in order to do any additional work in those 3 buildings. So that's where we are. But I do know that our staff has been out there trying to do small things, but redoing pavement and concrete work could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It seems like at a minimum, though, the heating concerns.
But the heating concern, that's brand new heating and air conditioning, so that definitely has to be followed up on because those are brand new systems in that building.
We can make sure that happens.
So we'll have someone right out for that. And we'll continue to try to work, but that's how it happened. It's not a new building. It was added back in, and we don't have those maintenance dollars to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Nelms, we are ready to start the resolutions, I believe. And Mr. Nelms, please present the resolution for board consideration that you have before you.
Well, I didn't do my homework, but I'm going to wing it from here. I have a resolution to join the Ohio School Board Association, and I present the resolution as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. And Mr. Nelms, you have another resolution for consideration? Second.
I have a resolution to join the Ohio School Board Association Legal Assistance Fund, and I do present the resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, second myself.
Just because you're the Ohio School Boards Association representative.
I
you
need
don't get to
a
do it all.
V8. That's what I need.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. Mrs. Bates, please present the resolution that you have for board
And
consideration.
I believe this is the revised modified tax budget.
Okay.
Okay. We have before you the resolution to adopt the revised modified tax budget for the 2014-15 fiscal year. I present this resolution as printed for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I defer to Ms. Witt for the discussion.
Okay. From the revised modified tax budget that you were given earlier. We are required, well, the Board of Education, if you'll recall back in December, I believe it was in December, did approve that and waived the tax budget, which means that we can present to the county auditor the modified tax budget. I did give each of you a copy of the modified tax budget, and let me just say the normal process that this tax budget would take would first be to go through the Finance Committee, review of it through the Finance Committee, and then on to the board. But because of, we only had one board meeting in December, and then we had some meetings that did not occur in December, we had to forego the Finance Committee piece of that because this document, the modified tax budget, must be filed by January 15th. So the modified tax budget is for the fiscal year 14-15 fiscal year. And this modified tax budget does, it actually shows you the revenue from the county auditor and from the state. So you'll see in the first page the revenue, but because the county is on a calendar year and not a tax year, all of the dollars must be converted to a calendar year to accommodate the calendar year that the county auditor is on. So your first page is showing all of the revenue for the calendar year. Your second page is going to show the bond retirements. We have 8 different sets of bonds, including the city-county $5 million that we receive. So this is the schedule of all of those payments that I've given to each of the board members. And contained behind the revenue is all of the expenditures and the payments of that debt for the 13-14 and 14-15 school years. The revision that Mrs. Bates noted was on each of the expenditure pages, and if you would look on that third page, it's like in a pink or a fuchsia, I guess, where it says beginning unencumbered fund balance. The payments for June of 2013 were not deducted from that balance, so we revised each of those balances on the expenditure pages to reflect the actual beginning unencumbered balance, fund balance for each one of those. So I am submitting this modified tax budget to the board for approval.
Are there questions from board members? Mrs. Bates? Or I guess I should say Chairman Bates.
Right, for finance, but we would need to have the figures adjusted in here to match.
Those are the figures that you have in the resolution were unaffected by the changes I needed to make for the expenditures.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That may have answered my question, but out of this, even with the 3 changes, is there anything else we can anticipate, Ms. Witt, in the next 6 months? Or?
Absolutely not. We have our debt is fixed.
Okay.
So we have the schedule for all of our bonds and all of our debt.
Okay.
And also we have for like 26 to 32 years what those schedules are for payment. So these are all fixed.
Other questions? I have just one kind of a general question. How does this tax budget kind of inform the other budget development regarding expenditures or what we would have to be adopting in June?
Well, the debt schedules that you would see here, you would also see those same amounts on the 5-year forecast for those debts that are coming out of the general fund. If you would look at that schedule, that's the long sheet, you will see that numbers. If you look at the very top, you'll see some very small numbers that says General Fund Transfer Appropriations Fund 1 to Fund 2. That would be numbers 5, 6, 7, and 9. That portion is through the general fund. So that would be impacted on the 5-year forecast, would be included in our annual budget.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Appreciate it. I think we're then ready for a roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coon.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. Mrs. Copeland Dansby, do you have a resolution for board consideration?
I do. I have a fiscal year 2013-14 amended appropriations resolution, and I present it as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Do we have discussion or questions, or shall we?
I'd like to refer to Diana to just give an update as to any changes or anything that needs
Sure.
to be mentioned.
If we look at the 13-14 amended appropriation resolution, in June of this year, the board approved the general fund appropriation of $474,218. You'll see that number. That number cannot change without board approval for the general fund appropriation. What you'll see under special revenue fund and all of the other funds, as, for example, for grants, a lot of times what the state and feds will do, even though we know the total appropriations, they'll release 80% or 90% of that particular grant. As they release those grants, the numbers will change. So we will know what our total appropriation is, and we have to make sure that we're staying within the guidelines or spending within the guidelines of each one of those grants. So you could see a revised appropriation actually on a monthly basis as these numbers change. One of the things that the board did ask me to do, if there was any significant changes, for example, when we had the sequestration and we had a reduction in some of our federal grants, we did share that with the board so they could see the dollars that were reduced from one fiscal year to the next. So it's those kinds of things that I would certainly bring before the board. I also, again, through finance, the appropriations also, just as a checkpoint, do go through finance as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the treasurer? All right, roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye, thank you. And Mr. Coons, would you please present your resolution for board consideration?
I have a resolution approving students eligible for subsidy reimbursement in lieu of transportation for the 13-14 school year. I present the resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. Any discussion, question? What this may be about? Roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms. President Bolton.
Aye. And now we have a kind of a somewhat of a departure, but I think it will be beneficial for us. I think Mr. Berry alluded to it earlier today, and it is an outgrowth of the combined retreat that the former board and new board had as we kind of passed the torch and heard things that all board members were interested in pursuing. And one of the things where there seemed to be great consensus in the dialogue, and I know Mrs. Bates gave us some history about this to a certain extent, and that was the cooperation between the city of Cincinnati and the district of Cincinnati. And what then came from that was, as we've said, a call for a meeting with City Council's Committee on Education and Entrepreneurship. And then board staff, I want to thank board staff because they then did the research to put together not only the city ordinances or resolutions dating back to 2002 and then 2004, particularly on 2004 as it began the FMP, but then also saw the board resolution from 2004 as well. And then we had what is in some form, I'm not sure verbatim, but in some form, a resolution proposal that will be going to City Council for their action. And it all is about cooperation between the city and the school district. And so we submitted that, so board members have had an opportunity to look at that city resolution as well as the historical resolutions. And I think the thought is not only that the board was interested in having greater cooperation, but it's also a recognition that the FMP is over and is it time to rededicate ourselves to it. So board work takes place in the open and very transparently, and would like to have some discussion about how we want to proceed, whether it's through committee or full board, or whether we're okay with this the city resolution as a beginning for our own. And certainly we have a different format, but we'll just have some open discussion as the board proceeds with this. It's not to be voted on tonight. Vice President Nelms.
Yeah, I'll say, first of all, I think it's time due. I think there's already some partnership, relationship, and collaborations that have already been forged with City Council. I know we have ongoing rapport, ongoing conversations about relationship building with City Councils, and especially what comes to mind is Mr. Berry's comments regarding how certain decisions made by council affect not only our budget, but how we do business. I know I attended Tuesday's town hall meeting hosted by Cincinnati Police Department and the chief, and he talked about one issue in particular, the old DARE program, the drug prevention program, and he's interested in reintroducing another program called REACH that will take place in our elementary schools. And so we had a conversation about how do we start now being proactive about reaching out and seeing how we can make sure that the process is smoother, if that is in fact the plan, and then what would be our part and our responsibility in that. They want to access our schools, they want to access our kids, so I think we need to be proactive in having a conversation. And if the board agrees, I'll reach out to the chief and see if we can set up some type of meeting or dialogue. If it doesn't include the full board, based on your schedule and availability, maybe Superintendent Ronan and President Bowden and whoever else desires to go can be a part of that initial conversation, and even Sun administration, based on Superintendent Ronan's charge. So I think it's important. I think it's time, and I think now would be the time for us to at least probe that possibility.
Mr. Manera, and then we'll have Mrs. Bates.
Thank you, President Bolden. One of the concerns that I would like to make sure that we're all sensitive to is that some of this, I would say a large part of the success that we have enjoyed at CPS is our community learning centers and our local school decision-making committees, because they have kept us aware of what is needed immediately in that community. And for us to keep that in mind, that as we communicate, we are able to reach into these LSDMCs and look at our community learning centers in each of the communities and to think about what are the things that are important to them. I think it's great, like Mr. Berry pointed out, some of our crossing guards. You know, there are some intersections that have crossing guards, there's some that don't. And those neighborhoods, the way we will identify them as a board is if we encourage these LSDMCs, for example. That's just one way for them to come and have conversation with us. So I know we're not voting, I know we're not deciding anything, but I would like for us to encourage whoever will have the conversations with the different authorities of the city to keep that we don't have all the answers what is needed in each of our communities, but we do have a system in place that is working for us and is making us, you know, really good at what we do, because we have individuals in the community who are investing time in these schools and who are advocating for what they need. So just to keep that in mind through the process, I think would be very important.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates, and then Mrs. Hoffman.
Okay, well, I have quite a history with this interaction, and I'll tell you what doesn't work. It's when the whole board and the whole council are involved. We have ceremonial meetings, and that's it. What has worked is when we've had a small working group. And not to contradict what you were saying, Mr. Nelms, but I do think that this group has to be held accountable, and we need to have bylaws developed, and the board should work with council members, and the administration should work with administrators. We shouldn't be working directly with the city manager or the police chief. The board members and the council members should be developing the shared policy goals as we see in section 2, and the administration should be executing those shared goals. I have some particulars that I wanted to share about the resolution, just to make it a little bit more specific. But I do think we need to do this in a smaller group of people who are dedicated to spend the time, develop the relationships, but also, but to do it in a way that goals are adopted and that there's a way to hold the city accountable. I mean, it's no secret to this board that we had this relationship, and then the city manager would turn around and present this budget that cut us off at the knees. And we would have lost our SROs if it wasn't for Sandy Hook. That is a fact, because that was on the table. And as soon as Sandy Hook occurred, it was taken right off. So we lost we have our crossing guards, we don't get funding, no funding. We do have developed a relationship with the City Department of Health, so we've been able to save much of our health services, but we really need to hold this group accountable to these shared goals and do this in a very formal way as outlined here. But what I was going to suggest that we add is in
what section?
Section 2 on the back page. It says that the joint working group will arrive at shared policy goals to be adopted by the board and city council. Are we going to both share this resolution? Is that kind of the idea, or?
That has not been discussed, just that we know on their track it's going to be moving forward, and we want to know how on our track. So the similarities or dissimilarities, it seems to be what works for the body, as long as we find some common ground.
Yeah, I want to make sure that the board adopts those goals so that it's coming from all of us and not just this group. And I think we could share that with city council and have council do the same, so there's ownership. In Section 3, that both city and district administrations will formally report back quarterly on progress towards established goals, or we could even say adopted goals. And then ongoing communication on shared issues shall be held in a timely manner as these issues develop, so that, so that the city manager doesn't blindside us by going to city council with and we could be non-specific because we don't have a city manager now, but that the directive is that that communication occurs
ongoing,
so that the recommendation doesn't come out and then we're fighting again, because that's been the breakdown, these behind the scenes kinds of discussions and decisions that were made. And I mean, if we're going to start anew, we need to be upfront and have the goals out there in an agreement that these are going to be discussed, and we're not going to read about it in the Enquirer.
Thank you. Very, very specific, and value what you've said. Mrs. Hoffman.
Yeah, I think similar to what Ms. Bates was saying, I think making sure that we have expressed goals that are measurable. It seems like in some of the language from the previous years, there was a lot of stuff about attracting and retaining young families, which I think is all of our goals for the city, but I'm not sure if there was ever measurable goals that were then followed up on to make sure that those things were happening. So I think the more we can make sure that we are aligned in what the goals are, they're measurable, and that we're reporting back formally, the better. I also, there's a lot in here about the community learning centers, which I think is a great opportunity to partner with the city. And I think in general, this is a really great idea in the direction we want to be going in. And I was just wondering if there's opportunity to broaden that. There's so many other places where we could be partnering with the city. I think, like Superintendent Ronan was speaking about at the beginning of our meeting, we know we have such a mobility issue, and there's so many opportunities, to partner with the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority or other parts of the administration, the city administration, where we can help our most the kids that are most transient to figure out how can we keep them, if they need to leave their apartment or their home, how can we keep them in the same school? And if we could partner with the city on those kinds of issues, I think that could do huge things for our kids. We also know we have a lot of CPS buildings that aren't currently being used, and partnering with the city on their land use plans, what they're looking for. We know they're redoing their form-based code. Are there different schools that could be part of that? There's so many different intersections with our properties that we're not currently using, and figuring out how the city could partner with us on those issues too. And then we know there's lots of opportunities with the preschool promise as well. And so I think maybe one of the things when I was reading through this was just it seemed very specific towards the community learning centers and figuring out where are there other opportunities that we could really benefit in partnering. And then the last thing was in the resolution, it says to meet on a monthly basis. And I'm not sure if we want to put the specific how often we want to meet in here, because that might be determined by, we might want to meet more often at the beginning while we're establishing goals. We might want to meet less often if we have something rolling and we don't necessarily need to meet. So just making sure that there's flexibility for the folks who do end up on this committee.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Mrs. Dancy?
Yeah, thanks so much. I definitely agree about the goals. I think the one thing that I have not heard is community buy-in and how we incorporate the voice of the community in any decisions that are made related to collaborative partnerships with the city of Cincinnati. Further, I also wanted to talk about just alignment with what our current goals are for the new year, and I just don't think we know what those things are quite yet. Community learning centers, of course, are broad and do have quite an urgent need to have partnerships, but I also think that we need to make sure that we're very intentional about aligning our interactions with the city to what the board's long-term goals are, with a time stamp on that and a very measurable way to hold folks accountable. And I agree with Melanie that I think too many folks involved or whole boards and whole councils involved just gets muddied in that. So two, if there's an opportunity to participate moving forward, I'm happy to raise my hand and work alongside with you or whomever else as a member of the board to get it done.
Other suggestions, comments, or
along
reactions?
that same vein,
Mr. Coons?
I think we've all had some good input so far.
Yeah, pretty smart board.
I hope mine is good too. It probably won't be. I just want to know how many board members we're thinking, 2 or 3? How many council members are we thinking?
I don't know that that it would be determined. We always have our quorum issues. I do know through a conversation that the city attorney folks have said that this working group would come under the sunshine law, and so would have to be noticed and what have you. Beyond that, I don't think they've investigated the number or what have you. I do know that there's a great interest, and I agree, not having these ceremonial dog and pony shows, but I know that there's great interest among all board members that we somehow find a way to participate. So it might be offshoots of it as to particular issues like mobility or what have you. So, but nothing's been said. I think they might have 3 and 3 or whatever, but I think that's to be determined upon suggestion.
I think if it is subject to sunshine laws, then we don't have to worry about having less than or fewer than 4. So that's the reason I asked. And then also, I think the question of whether or not this goes through committee or whole board came up. I think obviously if it were to go through committee, partnership and public engagement is where it should have its focus, and maybe that's a good idea so that if there's a lot of work to be done around this and informing this group, which it sounds like there might be, it doesn't take up all our board meeting time, but at the same time, it seems like all 7 people are very interested in this topic, so wouldn't want to leave anybody out.
And I do like if we can work this out when we can, where the whole board actually gets to have a discussion about it and have enough time to kind of plan and participate. I would assume that from the suggestions tonight, there would need to be some working group from the board, be it a committee or volunteers or what have you, that would then start to incorporate in a format that is representative of our format, the kinds of things that have been included by the city, perhaps, and certainly the things that we've added. So it would seem that after this broad discussion, then maybe it goes to the PPE or it goes to the chairs of the various committees, whatever. You'd have to be on it twice. But at any rate, I'm open to obviously suggestions in what the board thinks we need to do.
Well, I'll say just for me, as relates to this issue, I'm more interested in support and fellowship and less interested in leadership. So I'll just follow along.
All right. Where does the board want to refer this to committee, which would be kind of normal, or does the board want to continue to, as a full board, start to add more things and subtract certain things, and then have another return to this in 2 weeks with a different possible draft and be ready to vote on it later. What's the thought, Mr. Manera?
At this moment, I would like for us to keep it as a board. I really enjoyed listening to everybody, and because there is nothing solid, I would just like to be updated on what thoughts or ideas might come about, and see if we can bring it up in 2 weeks, and maybe we've had some time to think about it and move forward at that point.
Would it be okay with the board that if board members, I took notes and I know other people did too, staff as well, of the things that were suggested, we at least start to put that list together and then start to draft something that we can begin to react to and add to individually through staff, and then begin to have a second draft or a first board draft, actually, because this is a city draft, a first board draft that we could look at as early as January 27th. Does that work?
Yeah. And when would we, so the only thing is I don't want to be working in a bubble outside of the city. So are we going to be getting some of these suggestions to the city before or after? Like, I don't know what their timeline is. So I don't want us to be going on one timeline.
I'm not sure what their timeline is. I do know that it's going through in some form, this initial draft, through their committee. So I would imagine we're kind of paralleling because they've got to do the committee, then they've got to, get the mayor to buy in and what have you. So I would imagine it's a parallel, but we should have some dialogue. And maybe those things can be worked out.
Yep.
We can do that.
At least touching base about timeline.
Yeah.
Not drafting and redrafting each other's stuff.
I'd like to hear Superintendent Ronan's response or reply or thoughts on this matter too, since it's going to involve her to some degree.
No, I think it's a great idea. The administration has been working with the City of Cincinnati's administration just over the course of the facilities master plan. We had to interface with a multitude of city departments. Sometimes it went great, sometimes it didn't. We've also had to, CRC actually send staff to a number of our buildings for after-school programming, so we have a relationship there. And then, as you know, we do have 10 SROs in our building that are paid for by the city, and the new police chief has added, we had 8, he did increase it by 2. So for that, we are very grateful. So no, we're always looking at ways to partner, and certainly the administration will be at all the meetings and will help this partnership.
Thank you.
And I would just add that, kind of looking at what the Enquirer had written about wishes for the next year or what have you, or knowing what these folks heard out on the campaign trail, the citizens are expecting us to maximize the leverage that we have in existing resources, and they're expecting governmental units to work together. So I think this would be a great thing for us to find a way to facilitate. So we'll have staff start to put together another kind of evolving draft that we can all react to, and then send some suggestions to Phyllis and to Pat, and we'll keep abreast of how this thing is evolving. And then hopefully have another full board discussion on the 27th. Is that good? Mm-hmm.
And
Great.
President Bolden, just one more comment. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the City of Cincinnati Health Department. They have been so wonderful working in our schools and the health centers, helping us out when we have any kind of medical crisis. So the health department has been a wonderful partner.
I would second that, and I also would invite any board members, I think, to kind of show you where the city is, at least some of its leaders, and hopefully all, tomorrow at the Education and Entrepreneurship Committee. We will be, reading a kind of a presentation, and I appreciate Public Affairs and board staff for helping us put that together. And then following what we present, indeed, Dr. Crumpton will be presenting the absolutely historic story, if you will, of our school-based health centers. So just fantastic opportunities for us to keep turning the page.
That's at 2 p.m. at City Hall, right?
Yes,
okay.
And the PPE committee will be there. Now, the vice president may or may not be there, but I know he's downtown working for the board.
He's known to pop in.
Look, I won't be there because I have another secret meeting tomorrow at the rest.
I think with some city folks, if I recall. Okay, yeah, there you go. Hey, we're out there. Well, great. Thank you all for the discussion and the suggestions, and we'll keep working on it. And now, do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of our superintendent?
So moved.
Could we please make those the revised recommendations? And I do have a really quick report, if that would be okay. It's very...
Take a picture.
Well, it's a sad report.
Oh, no.
I wanted to inform the board that 2 of our staff members passed away over the winter recess. Right. One was Patricia Lewis, a custodian. She started with us in 2003. She worked at Midway and Fairview Clifton. So our condolences go out to her family. And the second staff member who passed was Elizabeth Vainrib. She's been an intervention specialist with the district since 2007. She worked at Riverview, Silverton, and most recently at Euler. Plus, she has 2 children in the district, a child at Kilgore and a daughter at Walnut Hills. Plus, I believe she was a Girl Scout leader in the district, so she will be greatly missed. So our condolences go out to her family also.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
And then the recommendations are revised recommendations.
Revised. Do I have a motion?
So
Mrs. Bates moved and Mr. Kuhn seconded. Any discussion or questions for our superintendent? Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nell?
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manera. Any questions or discussions?
I have a question about number 15 on page 2. Amend the lease of North Fairmount School. I don't know that this needs to be included in here, but I'm just curious, is the use changing at all? I know there had been some discussion about the program that's there was changing.
I have to ask our general counsel. I believe she's been in contact with that group most recently.
Change the use. He says their enrollment is increasing, but there's no plan. They said that they would like to talk about purchasing the building probably next year.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelms?
Yeah, I have a question, just probably an explanation of page 2, item 13, and it kind of states here what our responsibilities are in terms of, this is another example of partnership. But are we, do we provide anything else, Madam Treasurer, for agreeing to allow our sites to be used as polling places?
No, we're just good. We're just good citizens, and we do get nothing in return. The Board of Elections does come to us just because oftentimes there aren't enough churches or other buildings in a neighborhood, and they use our schools as polling places.
I have a question.
Mrs. Bates?
And this question I raised the last time, and I wasn't sure if I got a really good answer or if there were observations, but who pays for the security to make sure that there isn't, that people don't enter our school building because of the increased access?
At this point, I mean, there is no additional security, but we could certainly have that discussion with the Board of Elections. We do try to put it, for instance, in a gym and cordon it off, and then our youngsters don't get PE that day, or they have to go out on the playground, because we do use use of our facility, but we do try to keep it in an area that the adults aren't mingling with the children. But you are correct, they are in the building.
Can this be contingent upon assurances of security?
Certainly, we could do that.
I could add to that, I mean, as a board member, I'm concerned particularly about the safety piece and additional access to strangers and what have you as a result of it. I also know that our buildings, since we are among the newest buildings in all the neighborhoods, we're the ones that are best equipped to be, universally accessible. However, because it's a school ground and because it's school property, it also has some issues regarding whether or not people are allowed to hand out materials on school grounds. And so the whole issue of the democratic process being facilitated, I wonder, because I know halfway through the election day in some polling places, people had to give up their material or move their signs out to the public spot and what have you because of the arrangements that we have with other organizations. So I do think that this, as well as another kind of charge left by the former board to additionally review not only the election day operations, but start to review exactly how we conduct our own campaigns, not as individuals, but as a school district. So those are things on the horizon that we do need to look at. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Well, I guess we're ready.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. And then we have the next to last item on our agenda, if I could, staff and I kind of took the personal privilege, I guess, to start to, instead of calling something other business, start to call it inquiries and updates, because what we found with the other business, some members were ready to discuss that other business and other members were not yet prepared to discuss it. So if we can kind of look and see what we need to inquire, it's short of an assignment and it's also sort of not part of the kudos, but it might be updates that we'd like to have the board share on. So if that's okay with the board, we'd like to have that item be called inquiries and updates rather than other business. Is that all right? Okay. Are there any inquiries or updates?
I just wanted to make sure that some of the ones that got discussed as we met were here, like the Gamble Montessori. I don't know if we need to restate it with our new format and all.
Okay.
So I guess it's an inquiry about the heating at Gamble.
And that might rise to the level, obviously, of an assignment as well. But it might behoove us, and at the end of any meeting, to kind of review what it is that we've talked about and what needs doing.
Yeah.
I know. Fortunately, we have staff here that helps us figure that out. Mrs. Bates.
Yes. And this is an inquiry because we had passed a resolution in the fall regarding expanding opportunities for all students to participate in advanced placement courses at all of our high schools. And then I heard some conflicting comments made during the orientation that it's up to the high schools. So I wanted to make sure that the board and the administration during one of the committee meetings had that conversation to make sure that it was clear what the intent of the resolution was, so that if planning had to be done this year to execute this next year in full, that there's no question about how the board intended this to move forward.
So can we assign it to student achievement?
That would be a good
Makes
idea.
sense. So it's an update and an inquiry, but more particularly an assignment to student achievement and whatever necessary information you all can request. Great point. Anything else for inquiries and updates? Are there any assignments besides the ones we just sort of handed out?
I missed an update. Chris Nelms invented a word tonight, fellowship. I'll never forget it. As opposed to leadership.
You never learn to lead until you learn to follow.
Well, we're going to keep a running tally of these words, I'll tell you, that all of us will invent in the midst of these meetings as we try to reach for what it is we're trying to make. That's a kudo. Anybody else? Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Mr. Miles and Mr. Lofton, may I see you, please?
You know what we do to help?
Oh, I take a stack to Phyllis.
Center H.
Was it Lee?